and then the assumptions we made from this study case, and then questions that were from the prompt, and any questions that we thought were prominent to the prompt itself, and references from the Code of Ethics, and then we'll also discuss the Code of Ethics and how it applies to prompt, our counter arguments, and as well as the custom unit. And then anything, and the action that we should have taken from the from the case study facts that we have for A, he worked with the U.S. government for many years, and then he retired from a higher management position in the government to an executive position in Supercom. He was informed by another manager from another division about a test that was not followed by the Department of Defense, and that was not performed by specification, and that the company for a couple of years were using cheaper testing, but still gave them the same results. He went to there's also expertise in the testing technology involved. He also in his own time examined the test cases that were less cost effective and were more expensive, and they both gave the same results. He brought it up to the higher management team, and he advised for the contract modification between the Department of Defense and Supercom. But however, executives chose to just continue on with what they were doing, and engineer A, being just entering into the company, chose to not pursue the matter any further. Assumptions we made were that the occupation that engineer A took from the government, from the public sector to the private sector, was followed accordingly to the law, because there's a time period before transferring into it. And from the prompt, we saw that he reviewed and studied the different test results, but we assumed that he did not make any tests from the specified from the Department of Defense, and only looked at the results from the possible from the two tests. The prompt question that was given was it ethical for engineer A to pursue the matter further? And questions that we thought were relevant were, does engineer A face a conflict of interest? Is Supercom honest in its testing of the project? Is Supercom's not reporting of the less costly testing method in any way harmful to the Department of Defense? And you will continue with the references?
We refer to the actual Code of Ethics. And then these are the sections we refer to, numbers 2, 7, 9, and 10. We will refer to these later on. First off, note that number 2 is spoken to avoid real or perceived conflicts of interest whenever possible, and to disclose them to affected parties when they do exist. So we determined that engineer A has an internal conflict of interest. He debates between reporting the test procedure discrepancy, but wants to maintain the good standing within the company. As a new hire to the company, wants to start off on the right foot. Number 7, to seek, accept, and offer honest criticism of technical work, to acknowledge and correct errors, and to credit properly the contributions of others. Supercom did not inform the Department of Defense of their simplified and less costly testing method, even though no motion was made regarding the contract modification. And then number 9, to avoid injuring others, their property, reputation, or employment by false or malicious action. We define injury as physical, emotional, or financial detriment, and by not reporting implementation of the less expensive yet equally effective test, Supercom is financially injuring the Department of Defense.
So I'll continue with the last one of the Code of Ethics that we thought was pertinent to this. So number 10 is to assist colleagues and coworkers in their professional development and to support them in following this Code of Ethics. When engineer A decided not to pursue the matter further, he broke this because he also made it so that his colleagues did not pursue the matter further either, as they wanted to continue the course of action. And as far as counter arguments go, the main question that was at hand was it ethical for engineer A to not pursue the matter further? And so we found that there's no way it can be seen that not pursuing the matter further is an ethical course of action. And so our counter argument is, answering that question as no, but then different groups might see that IEEE Code of Ethics number 3 is broken, but we believe that it's not. So the number 3 reads to be honest and realistic in stating claims or estimates based on available data. So the data was obtained through unapproved testing procedures. The Department of Defense thought that Supercom was using their the given or the prescribed testing method, whereas they were using a much simpler, cost-effective testing method. However, Supercom was not falsifying the claims that they were presenting. They were presenting the claims that they had found using their testing method. However, that may have not been disclosed to the Department of Defense. So the questions that were stated earlier, the first one was it ethical for engineer A to not pursue the matter further? No, it was not, according to the Code of Ethics numbers 2, 7, 9, and 10. The next question is, does engineer A face a conflict of interest? The answer to that question is yes, according to number 2. Is Supercom honest in its testing of the product? No, they're not, according to number 7. And is Supercom's not reporting a less costly method in any way harming the Department of Defense? And the answer to that one is yes, according to number 9. So as far as the conclusion goes, we answered the question. It was unethical for engineer A not to pursue the matter further. Full disclosure of detractions from the contract should have been made. The recommended course of action for engineer A is to approach even higher management regarding the issue. See if anything can be done there. If that fails, then he should pursue to organizing a meeting between the two parties to inform both parties that, hey, there's something wrong here, and I want to try to correct that. And then if that doesn't work for some reason, then he should anonymously report this falsification or this different testing methods that are being used. And so that's all we have for the slideshow. So now we'd like to open it up for questions. Yeah.
So first, I just want to commend your team for doing a great job on the code and the diligence around that. But I also want to pull on your counter argument a little bit, number 3. So here we have a contract on testing methods, and we have a company accepting payment on that contract, yet using a different method. Is that being honest in stating claims?
So the way that we examined this was the last part that's very important. It's based on available data. So the data that they collected was using.
Now that they know that they're using a different scope of testing, that's available data. They know that they're not following the contract. They know that.
Right.
Are they being honest in accepting payment?
You got 2 choices, yes, no. Make
So
it easy for you.
I personally feel that they're still not breaking this one. They're being honest in the sense that, or they're not being honest in the sense that they're still accepting the payment, but in terms of giving their, stating their claims, it's based off of honest data, but not necessarily the
Another
method
claim
of-
they're stating is that we're following the contract. Aren't they making that claim that, thank you for this payment? We're following your contract.
If that's what accepting the payment means, then yes.
Yeah, it does.
That's what it means.
That's exactly what
Yes.
it means.
Then
So
yes.
what we're trying to get here is it okay ethically? Is there something more than just ethics here involved? Because if you sign a contract to do something and you don't fulfill your contract, what recourse does that person have? What do they do to people that don't follow through on their contracts?
Contracts are nullified if the terms are not fulfilled.
Okay, and so what do you have to do with the money you took to do the job?
Okay, bye.
Okay, you gotta give it back. But there are some contracts that say that if you break this contract, you owe 50% penalty. If you don't fulfill everything you say you're gonna do in a timely manner, you have another 50% penalty. There are programs that have been done for free. And I can name several that we gave, this corporation did, we gave the government for free. First we lost all our profit, and then we lost all the schedule and all the money that went with it, and then we still had to deliver out of our own pocket at the bottom line. We gave it to him for free. So that question right there, if that ever comes up, and there's a contract, don't ever forget, contract is God. That is the rule. You break the contract, there are damages to pay. Now, ethically, I disagree with what you're saying, that they kind of like based it on information. You're looking at the test results. You're looking at it from an engineer's eye. Test result A is 5. Test result B is 5. So based on that, you think they're the same. So I will offer up to you, if I run a complete continuity test of this building, every socket, every wire, everything, and come to the conclusion that it's perfect, or I find another way that says, I'll turn on the power and I'll wait to see if someone complains that their light didn't come on. No one complained, so therefore it all works. What's wrong with that statement? It's same result.
Well, I mean.
What if somebody wasn't in room A and that one didn't work, but they didn't throw the switch?
I mean, in this
How do you find those things out? A lesser test will not determine that. So my point to you is, if you have a test, you must comply. Even though the results are the same, 2 tests were done differently, you got to the same point. Okay? Go ahead.
So here's a really good example. Thermal testing. I buy a part from Advanced Micro Devices. On their spec sheet, there's a number. I need to put this system through a thermal profile to see if it works at temperature. Right? It goes on the ground, goes up to 70,000 feet, comes back down. Needs to work. So my test says I need to go from ground level at 30 degrees or 27 degrees C, and I'm going to go up in altitude, let's say maybe 10 degrees C, and I need to go there at a certain slope, and that slope is defined in the government spec. But what I do instead, I said, well, I don't want to do that because that takes time. So I'm just going to put it at 10 degrees C, test. I'm going to put it at the other temperature and test. I'm not going to do the slope because that takes time. Hey, test results good. Put that in the report. Here's the numbers. Done. Is that okay?
So in this prompt, we assume that engineer A is an expert in this sort of testing environment. So since he looked at the testing in the both methods and verified it, I'm sure that he didn't just look at point A and point B and that realized that the slope.
But does it matter that the engineer decided that this was a better test when their contract says we're going to do this described the required test? And he says, I got a better test. Does it matter that he said, well, we're going to do test A, but actually we're doing test B? He's decided, the company decided it was better. So how is that relevant that it's a, I mean, why is it, whether the test was much better or only a little bit better, doesn't matter?
Okay.
Let me ask
Ma'am,
you.
weigh in on this. They seem to be debating. Corey? Okay. Please weigh in on this. What is your thought to this? Was that engineer ethical in taking the money on a contract to do a specific test and did another? Was that ethical?
By contract, if we define it by contract, which our group decided when we were working on it together, that it wasn't like when we discussed it by just data alone. It wasn't by following the contract. If following by the contract would have been unethical, but by following just like the data results and the fact that engineer A was an expertise in his field, and the fact that even though like the manager reported that it's been over a couple of years, that company has been doing that, and that engineer A took his own time in actually looking into it and following it.
Yeah.
That without the contract, it would have been
Yeah.
ethical.
So
But
ethical,
with the
unethical?
contract,
Ethical, unethical? Swapping out the test.
Swapping up that.
Yeah, by doing the lesser test, was he ethical or unethical? That's the question to you.
Let me just interject before you answer. So, I do appreciate this analysis, but we don't overthink this debate on tort law, you know? You can just read the first 3 words of the code, you know, to be honest. You know, I know you're trying to struggle with, but the contract, but the data sets us free here, you know, and the, you know, the contract. Just stop it, don't necessarily overthink it, just say, look, to be honest is how it starts. I mean, is it ethical or unethical? Are they being honest?
What, by not following the contract is being unethical.
Yeah.
Very good response. Short and to the point.
Not that I don't enjoy the debate, Harsh.
So they had a contract by which there was a procedure that was outlined in the contract. The fact that this gentleman came from government and had expertise really is irrelevant, because he is not the guy that gets to make the decision for the government on what the procedure should be. And that's where they have an ethical obligation to inform the government what they did, because it's the government that's paying them to do this work, and it's the government that gets to define what is acceptable or not.
Yes.
It's not the company.
The customer, you've heard this before a million times, the customer sets the rules, customer sets the guidance, customer sets the expectations, the customer's got the money. In order for you to take that money from that customer, you have to agree to everything that customer set down for you. That is the contract. So in this case, ethics is doing the right thing and being honest. So did they do the right thing in swapping something out? Probably not. Were they honest when they didn't disclose that? Probably not. So if you look at the probabilities, there are many areas that they failed in. So when you put that many things together and you check the box, they weren't honest, they weren't telling the truth, they weren't going forward, all of that comes back. So what we're trying to get from you is to understand that your premise or your conclusion that they were ethical by swapping out. You got 4 engineers up here that are telling you no. So that point right there, just walk away from this one. Agree to disagree with us, but remember, in the real world, you go to jail for it. Okay? So, next question. You sat down and you said that the individual went through and tried to enlist support to do things. What other avenues could of that engineer A have done other than what he did, which was back away from it and let it go? What things could that have engineer done?
So in terms of the course of actions that they're taking?
Other courses of action, yeah. Now we're outside the box.
Outside of
You gave us a couple there, but what other things? There's many things that engineer could have done. Engineer could have went outside and jumped off the 10th floor. I mean, there's a lot of options, so give me some avenues. Give me some examples of what you think that engineer could have done, aside from jumping off the 10th floor.
Well, he could have advised his superiors of the legal consequences of taking that company course of action.
That's good. Another one?
A more extreme case would have been whistleblowing, but.
That's good.
Try to
Another
avoid
one?
that.
The other one would have also been going to the person that they are in contact with and telling the Department of Defense what's going on, what's going on with that person. You know, he's new in that company.
What do you think you should do first?
Take it up with the superior.
Right answer. First thing is you go to your boss. You tell your boss, this is wrong. And then you go from there.
And he says, go pound sand. This is good.
Where do you go?
What do you do?
You go to his boss.
Okay? But before you do that, I'm going to give you some advice. If you disagree with your boss, don't just close the door and walk out, because that will cause you pain. Before you leave the room, you say, you realize that I am ethically bound
That's right.
to go to your boss, and I'm notifying you now that I am going over your head, I'm going to your boss, and I'm going to explain this to him and see what results I get. However, you have one last chance to change your response before I go to your boss. And if he says, have at it, go to my boss, now you got permission to go. But before you leave, remember, let him know that you're going over his head. Don't just do it, because there's repercussions.
But you don't need that.
You don't need permission, but you just tell him, you let him know.
It's better,
I'm doing it.
It's better with permission, right? So that way they know
Oh, yeah.
they're going to
Yes.
they will be notified.
You keep him in the loop. Now, he's going to think or she's going to think, say, oh my God, Is this really, really, really worth fighting for? And you might get a different answer real quick. Anyway,
And-
What other way?
In that case, you're giving your boss the opportunity to do the right thing without getting sidelined.
without getting hurt.
So now you cited that there was a conflict of interest, you cited item 2, but you didn't tell us, what is the conflict of interest? Can you cite all the conflicts of interest that you can recall from this case study?
Employee has a conflict of interest because while he wants to report the discrepancy, he also wants to maintain good standing. By reporting the discrepancy, while it avoids potential like difficulties down the road, it might provide like a delay in the project schedule. So that's another conflict of interest there for the company. Anything else?
When you're a manager and they in charge you with running an organization and producing a product, is that not your primary responsibility as a manager? To ensure the product meets the requirements, that it's made on time, on schedule, that under budget? Are those not goals of every manager? The triangle of death, you know what that is? Cost, schedule, performance, okay? One slips and the other one goes worse. And then to fix that one, you gotta go painfully in the other direction. So, once that gets out of balance, is it not the manager's job to control that right from the get-go? As a new employee, primary responsibility was to oversee that organization and immediately correct what's wrong. Now, didn't want to rock the boat, he's new, okay? As a professional, that should never enter your mind. Never should that enter your mind. You go there day one, you see something, you throw the flag up. And you just start going down the track. At the end of the day, they'll respect you for it. Okay? Never fear that you're going to start off on the wrong foot. If you walk into a cesspool and it's a cesspool, you
Call
better
it a
start
cesspool.
cleaning it up. Call it a cesspool, call it what it is, but start changing it, clean it up, turn the organization around. Okay? So, what other things do you think could have been done by this engineer?
In terms of the course of action, I think we agreed on the 3 main ones that we had stated on our.
Aside from that, I'm giving you that. I want you to continue to think outside the box. There are many ways to go here.
He should definitely report the issue in terms of how he should go about doing that. Going to his boss and boss's boss and whatnot.
Do you think a good company would have an organization that would have an ombudsman line where you could call and report something anonymously?
Yeah, the anonymity, we mentioned that. I think.
Okay. Do you think the company would have an organization that is responsible for meeting all the requirements of the contract?
Most definitely.
Okay. So there are many, many avenues within the corporation that engineer could have chose. Okay. So trying to make you aware of them is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to make you think that there are many options. And when you start looking at what you have, okay, when you leave here, you're going to think differently. Just remember, ethics, and I said this before, is what you do when no one's looking. Okay? Do the right thing, be honest. And so when you evaluate these things, you look at them. Are they honest? They telling the truth? They're realistic? Are they meeting their obligations? Okay? They have a responsibility. Okay? What if you bought a car and I'm in charge of doing the brakes and I didn't put brake fluid in it and I just said, I'll let it go. It's only one car. And you get in that car brand new and you drive out the driveway at the car dealership and you find out you got no brakes. We're on a first name basis at that point. That, Mr. Holt, right? So, think about that. Once you start changing things and substituting things, the consequences can get out of hand. Don't go there. Okay? So, you got anything else you want to say? We won't kill you on this.
I want to go back to the summary of the ethical questions. I want to make sure you earn your keep here. I want each one of you to specify a particular ethical question that had to be dealt with in this scenario without referring to the slot. Mr. Harsh?
Yeah, okay, so I mean, the main ethical question is not taking any course of action ethical for engineer A? Most definitely not. He should definitely report this issue. And then, do you want me to do the next one?
Supercom was not ethical in swapping out the test procedure without notifying the government, because despite having a so-called expert declare both tests fully effective, no two tests are completely effective, completely equal. So
You're good there. I'll let you go.
For engineer A, for what he took, but there was personal interest, he really should have just put aside whether keeping the job or not. If he knew what he was doing, then he would have just kept his job and just kind of pursued the company to do what was supposed to be right.
Keep in mind, this person was an expert, right? And so you would have been able to see that a mile away that that test was not the way to go. Okay. Anyway, guys, great job. And remember, no action is an action, no decision is a decision. Just because you didn't do it didn't mean that someone else is going to decide for you or going to do something for you. Nothing goes unpunished.
Okay, I want to have everyone except for the judges step out of the room so the judges can come to their decision.
Were they on time?